Fantastic to see you today, Collis Ta'eed, the founder, well, one of the co-founders, with your wife and brother and friend of Envato, legendary marketplace based in Australia, but global. It's so nice to talk to you. You're now in NT, and none of us hear from you as much as we used to. You're out of the company. Just love to hear from you about your journey while you were growing Envato, and a little bit about how you decided it was time to hand your baby on.
Well, thank you for having me, and happy to tell you all if you whatever you'd like to know about. It was nice to be remembered, even though I'm very, very far away now.
Oh, of course. So Collis, just for the few people that might not know about Envato, can you just tell us what it does, who its community is, etc.?
Sure, I think there's more than a few who wouldn't know. Envato is a platform for creative assets. People like me, I'm a designer by trade, and so designers and creatives will go there to find the stuff that helps them do their work awesomely. So they'll be making a video or making social media posts, and we together with our community of creatives around the world, supply assets. So every time someone buys or licenses something, there'll be a creative somewhere else in the world who's earning a living, hopefully, or sometimes a side income by uploading those things.
Yeah, awesome. And going over 10 years, how old is it now?
It's really old in like internet years. It's like very old. So we started in 2006, so this is year 17.
Yeah, 17.
Here on.
And you exited a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so 3 years ago now, 2020, I brought in a new CEO. And then, yeah, hot-footed up to Darwin.
Awesome. So if I know it's a wee way ago, but I also know those are pretty acute years. You probably remember them pretty well. How did you, I've also worked in a few marketplaces, including with you for a little while. And lots of founders I talk to say, how do you start? How do you start the flywheel of a marketplace? Can you remember and can you remember what you did and what would your advice be to those founders that I speak?
Yeah, it is a while. It is a long way. I tell people we're older than the iPhone. That's my benchmark of like how long ago it is. At this point, it feels like the iPhone's been there forever. Look, I think with marketplaces, and there's such a great business model, obviously. But I think for me, the most important thing to remember is that at the end of the day, it is a middleman type business. You're a facilitator of something. You're a facilitator of some kind of transaction, some sort of trade of value. And I think it all comes down to delivering good value in that role, like in any type of business, right? Like any business, whatever your role is, you're going to have success if you can deliver actual value. In a marketplace, though, the value you're delivering is primarily the connection. You can sort of get sidetracked into thinking you're doing other types of things, but at the end of the day, if you're not bringing together some kind of buyer-y type character and some kind of seller, and in some cases there's three-way marketplaces and four-way ones, but at the end of the day, if there's not that connection, then there's not a lot you're doing. And so I think the most important thing when you're starting a marketplace is getting that sort of liquidity going where you're delivering the value of connecting. And oftentimes you have to bring one side or the other to the table, right? So for us, we were a marketplace for digital assets. So the sell side is bringing digital assets and the buy side is buying them. And looking at the two, it was a lot easier to bring in digital assets using basically buying them ourselves, paying people to produce them, and then connecting them to real life buyers than it was to somehow pay the sell side out of our own pockets. I think you have to stimulate the market in one way. And in our case, it was to use our own meager resources to kind of fake the sell side for a while, and then just focus on trying to bring in buyers, generating that value for the buyer where they could find these assets that they previously couldn't find.
Yes.
And as that started to take off, we then spent more effort trying to put value into the other side, trying to find sellers and saying, hey, look, you could actually, without us paying you up front, you could actually be making money by selling your stuff. But I think that if you zoom out pretty much every marketplace has some version of this, whether you're like an Airbnb and you're like, okay, well, before anyone wants to rent anything, there needs to be something to rent. How do we do that? Maybe we'll go and send a photographer to some like apartments, or same thing with like car sharing like Uber, that sort of thing. Like they also need to find the liquidity, and oftentimes they're using incentives or financial pushes to try to get one side of the marketplace going while servicing the other. But at the end of the day, you have to have the two. Like, and I know I've looked at lots of different marketplaces, from like, digital types like what we do, through to, carbon markets, through to like, they all work in the same way. How you stimulate them, though, can be tricky. And I think maybe one of the places that people get tripped up is the idea that just because there could be a marketplace there, that it would be possible to create it. Sometimes the inertia you have to overcome is so substantial that, like, yeah, in theory, if there was this high value thing, there'd be customers, and if there were customers, there'd be more of the high value thing. But getting it started can be quite tricky. And I've seen that in certain types of like environmental markets. You see that where everyone's like, in this perfect world, there will be biodiversity credits, and then there's going to be buyers of those biodiversity, and it probably will work eventually. But just because there could be a market there, if you and I tomorrow were like, let's go start that marketplace, probably pretty tricky, quite a lot of inertia. To get that particular marketplace started, you have to have a lot of specialist knowledge about how those types of customers and sellers work. And so I think when I meet people who are setting out to try to start a marketplace, I think it's a mix of, is there value to be provided? And then can you, founder, actually provide that value? Like, do you have the specialist knowledge to make that happen? In our case, in 2006, we happened to, these two things, stars aligned, and it all came good. But
But you launched marketplaces pretty quickly, didn't you? And new categories pretty quickly within it. How did you make that call? Because each one would have had its own inertia to some degree.
And well, see, I think one of the things that is less true today than it was in 2006 is just there was a lot more, I guess, demand and less supply in the world for digital things. Like I actually often think that founders today of tech companies, I don't know, I look up to them. Their job is a lot harder. I feel like a 2006 tech founder like me, there wasn't a lot of competition. Sometimes we would launch things, and our marketing strategy was, we exist. Like, you did used to be able to do this, and now you could do this. Where today it's a hyper competitive marketplace. Like, one of my favorite things to do is I watch Product Hunt, which I don't know if you're familiar with Product Hunt, but product designers put up new products there, and literally every day there is like, I don't know, 30, 40 new products, and lots of them are really good. Lots of them are well made, and it's just like this barrage of onslaught of stuff, where I think at that time there was just more interest. Customers wanted stuff, and then there wasn't much stuff around. So early marketplaces that we put up, when we said, oh, now you can buy and sell Flash assets, there was a lot of customer interest just from like, I didn't know that. Hooray, I'll use it. Where today, if you try to do the same sort of thing, people will be like, oh, okay, well, why are you better than the current way I do this? So there's a lot more, in product work, you'd say they already have a way of dealing with the problem, and you are trying to explain to them, well, this is a better way for such and such a reason.
Yeah. That's so true of so much SaaS, which is so many of our startups, right? Like,
so many. I don't know how they differentiate themselves. It's like,
I know,
and even in like both the talent end as well, like internally as well. Like, I feel like the competition for people to go in workplaces, it's pretty savage. On the other hand, though, one thing that has changed is there is so much more infrastructure. There's so many more ways to get something online quickly that just did not exist. So I guess there are trade-offs, but on the whole, I would say it's harder today to be a tech founder than it was 10, 15 years ago, in my opinion. Not that I haven't A/B tested this, though. So.
No, it's interesting. And yet these epic new companies keep rising all the time.
Right? Yeah, I don't know how they do it.
Can pull it off. It never ends. Awesome. So when you left Envato, how many people did it get to by the time you left?
Like maybe 500-600. Yeah, more, like
500.
too many people.
Yeah. And you'd never run a company before, had you?
Never run a company before, no.
So
And
tell
I'm
us
an
about
introvert.
that. Yeah. Which is not uncommon. Lots of
Okay.
CEOs are introverts. So how did you do it? What did you do to kind of go, I'm sure you freaked out when you were 50 people, right? You thought, oh my God, that's enormous. And those records just kept hitting
Oh,
over years.
yeah.
Over 14 years as CEO. What are your tips? What did you do to learn how to run a company of those sizes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so to be clear, I freaked out when there was 7 people. So, I remember being like, oh my goodness, I need to have like catch-ups with all of them and they all need stuff. So like, I don't know if I'm the right person to learn from on any of these fronts. I think the things that I did, I think I made a lot of mistakes. I think that, and accepting that you're going to make lots of mistakes, I guess, is probably helpful. I don't think I thought I was making mistakes. I just slowly realized I was. I feel like if there's a mistake you can make in management, at some point I've done it. I don't know if this is what your other interviewees would say as well, but I can think of times where I've made pretty much every single mistake. I try to not get too beaten up by that and try to not make the same mistakes. Obviously, there's a big difference between making mistakes and just doing the same thing over and over again. But I think like, trying to always be in this kind of continuous learning mode, like feeling like you have to like figure this stuff out, that it's not acceptable to just go, oh, well, whatever, I'm a crappy manager, then therefore that's just life. Like, I think, feeling like, well, no, my job is to level up. And then how can I do that? And these days, there's so many resources around. There are so many books and podcasts. If anything, I think one of the dilemmas I'd say a modern founder probably has is how to find the signal out of the noise, or how to not be barraged by all of it. But like, I think on specific people advice, there is lots to be found, like how to manage individuals, how to lead leaders, how to lead teams. I think for me, it was more like at the meta level, it's just accepting that you don't know. Like, I didn't know. I'd never even worked in a place that had more than like 7 people. It's not that I was like, oh, I've never led, but I've been led. I'd never encountered an HR team, for example. I didn't know what I can remember someone in an interview. I was interviewing someone and they were like, so what are the KPIs for this job? And I was like, I don't know what a KPI is. You'll have to explain that to me and then I'll tell you what they are. And so there was like a lot of that kind of level of hopefully your listeners will be like, okay, well, that's far ahead of this guy. Anyways, but I think for me, it was accepting I didn't know, not accepting that I shouldn't know. So just feeling like, well, no, I just need to learn. And then trying to find every source of information and, I would learn from people who were working in Envato. That was probably my biggest source. Like, people I had hired would often give me advice. You need this, and why don't we have that? And like, there should be these things in place, and we should have an all hands. Like, you never explain to us what's going on. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I should be doing that. Why isn't there an HR team? Why don't we have like offsites? Like, all of those types of things more or less came from people. I found interviewing often very helpful. Interviewing new people often meant interviewing a lot of different people about how a function might look, whether it was like an accountant or a lawyer or what have you, just being like, oh, so what in your opinion should the legal function in a business like this look like? And you'd end up getting like a lot of disparate kind of viewpoints. That was very helpful. Yes. And then of course, just bringing in really good people. Oftentimes, especially as you get larger, having people who've done it well somewhere else could come in and say, well, and you did this, you came in and went like, well, we need a technology function that's stronger. We need a leader over here. And like, having that kind of thing was just a real like fast track. If there's something that I would do differently, if I did my time again, it's probably had more mentorship and more outside help. I think I was a little bit probably inventing too many wheels myself, and ignoring the fact that it had been invented before. Anyways, but live and learn.
Interesting. Although I do remember you also were really great at asking questions like, why do we need KPIs? Like, that it's a true learner mindset, like in a way that I haven't seen
Oh, okay. I had like when I first accountant, I had this long debate about why budgets mattered. Like, why should we bother with a
Yeah,
budget?
yeah.
Now I'm mortified thinking back, and I just remember her looking at me like, I don't understand how
Where do
you
I
think.
start?
Why is the sky there? It's because that's what you need.
Yeah. But I found it really interesting because it does make you go, there is just so many things you just do because that's what you do. And it
Yeah.
was, we did look at it afresh. Like,
Yeah, that's the positive.
um,
The negative, on the other hand, is that it's a tax. I sometimes look back and think, gosh, that was like a lot of like overhead to introduce,
yeah,
where you're constantly like navel gazing into like, oh, should we do this? Should we do that? What is the point of this? And so, like on one side, you go, oh well, we get to do things the way that we think they should be done. But on the other side, sometimes there's a reason, and like eventually you'll learn the reason, or you can just accept it, move on, and focus on the stuff that is like genuinely value adding. I sometimes look back and think, how much time did I spend on genuinely value creating activities and how much was like unnecessary? There was this one point where maybe it was when you were there actually, that I was like, I don't think we should have managers as much. And so I tried this experiment where we got groups of people to try to lead different parts of the strategy in like little circles, and
no, I don't remember
it
that.
was so inefficient. It was like diabolical. Like we set these 8 strategic themes, and then each one had like 6 people leading it, and it was like cross-functional, and they would kind of just organically come together. It all sounded lovely. I reckon I could write an amazing sounding blog post about it. The reality on the ground was like,
Chaos.
what a giant cluster. Like there was one that was super functional, and just because the people happened to be just really, I don't know, they clicked together and they were functional. There was 2 that was like vaguely functional, and then there was 5 that was just dumpster fire, like inefficiency. Anyways, so that's like an example where I'm like, that was 6 months, 6 months of like effort, which was basically just like hacking away in a forest in the wrong direction, only to realize, okay, oh, we have to all like trudge back, and then now we're going to go in the right direction. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I would advocate for that kind of like total beginner mindset. It has its values, and it's like it's hard to argue with things that got you to where you are,
Mm.
but I can definitely see some substantive drawbacks. And if someone asks, "Hey, should I do that?" I'd be like, "No, just
Oh,
accept.
definitely.
Budgets are there for a reason. Managers have a function."
Yeah. Professionals occasionally helpful.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah, it's not just a bunch of made up
yeah. Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So if you were to, yeah, that reflection you mentioned mentors, like
Mm.
what would your key advice be? With what
Mm.
you did and with what you reflect.
Yes, yes. So, like, one of the things people often told me is that I needed a coach. I
Mm.
always struggled with that, in the sense that the times that I did have a coach, they were often helpful, but they were more provocative. Like they would go, like I remember one person saying to me, the reason I'm a good coach is I'm very lazy. I can't be bothered to do anything, and so I just like, I don't do the thing for you. I just prompt you, and then you have to do it. Makes total sense. What I think I actually needed, though, often was just answers. I needed someone who'd been there and done it already and was like, okay, at this stage of the business, this is probably what we need. And you have to remember, with Envato, we had no outside investors or anything. And so there was like, it's not that I had no mentorship, but it was pretty limited.
Yeah.
And so I think having more, like maybe an experienced product person on the board, an experienced technology person on the board, like I think just a few more voices probably would have helped, or in some kind of informal advisory sense. But
Mm.
I think I was, yeah, I don't know. Like it's probably even if I teleported back in time, I wouldn't be able to convince myself that I needed this, because at the time I was like, no, I don't need that. I'm busy reinventing
Products or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
too
Um,
headstrong.
like some founders in like our portfolio at Rampersante, they talk about just one person who's been there before. I don't know,
Hmm.
did you ever think about a CEO that was ahead of you, or was there just not enough maybe ahead of you?
Oh, I'm sure there's tons ahead of me.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, to be clear, there's plenty of people
yeah,
who've been there and
yeah,
done that before. I think I just probably could have benefited from even, one thing that I did later in my career, which I think was quite helpful, and I would probably advocate for people to do, is I started spending more time with other founders
Yeah.
in, I guess, like you'd call it my cohort. I don't know, like founders of businesses of similar size, not necessarily in the same industry, though often in the same industry, not necessarily in Australia either. In fact, mostly not in Australia. And I would just like spend time chatting about things, sharing stories. And it was very clear how much was common, how many founders and CEOs have basically the same stuff going on. Like,
Yes.
you like there's obviously quirks and, specifics. Like I remember talking to a founder of a sales-driven business, for example, and all of his stuff was about salespeople and the culture of salespeople. And I was like, oh, okay, well, we don't have those. So this is mostly irrelevant to me. But in a lot of other instances, it was just really clear how much stuff we were going through was the same. And then I think just sort of learning from like, oh, so how are you approaching this problem? Here's what I'm doing. I think that actually was very valuable. And I would probably aim to do that earlier. Whereas early in my tenure, I was a bit, I think I definitely had a lot of, what's the thing you call imposter syndrome? The one where you're like, you don't think you're supposed to be there. So I had like buckets of that. And so the idea of then talking to someone else was like, well, they'll just immediately realize I'm a total fraud and be like, what am I chatting to you for? You don't even know what a budget is. And so I think if I could, that's probably a place that I would do things a bit more differently. I mean, on my board, I had my dad helped me a lot, and he had been a CEO, so that helped a lot, but he was a different type of CEO from a different type of company in a different era. And so there were things that, he would advocate for that I just don't think were as transferable. There was plenty of stuff that he helped with that I meant that I did pick up on. So I think like I would probably, if I had my time again, balance that with someone that was in a similar spot at that kind of time.
Yeah, that's great advice. Contemporary kind of CEO.
Temporary, yeah.
Yeah.
Even if all you get is just someone else who goes, oh yeah, that's really hard. And you go,
Yeah,
oh,
true.
okay.
Well,
I'm not just
yeah.
dumb or bad at this or
Yeah. And maybe sometimes that's the thing you need to hear. Like, oh yeah, it's hard and no one else has solved it either. That could be very useful some days.
Yes, yeah, because like sometimes with, and other people's mileage may vary. Sometimes with certain types of companies, especially if you just read about them online, it seems like they've all got their stuff together. Everything's like a bit of a success story. So like right now, I'm with my 12-year-old son. I'm reading this book called Boys Will Be Human, and it's all about like as a boy growing up into manhood and it talks a lot about like how when you're young, you imagine that all these kind of celebrities and stuff, they don't have like self-doubt and they must like, they have no body image issue. They're not worried because look, they have a six-pack. And like this whole book is kind of unpacking some of this stuff and just say it's okay. Everybody worries about this stuff, even the most successful looking person. And I think in the business version of that is that as a founder, you look at all these other founders and businesses, it's like browsing Instagram. It's just like a big highlight reel, right? You read about these stories and they're like, and now we're doing squads and our innovation is off the. I've never read,
Yeah.
I guess I've read some. I've read very few pieces from other startup founders that were basically like, we just tried this thing for a year and a half and it was a huge dumpster fire. But undoubtedly, that's happening. I know, because as I just mentioned, I spent 6 months on something that was a total waste of time. We didn't write a blog post about it. We didn't go out there and say, hey, look, we really like you messed this up. And, so we're just letting everybody else know. Because, I just don't think that's how media works. In the same way that you don't often look at social media and then just see real life from people, because that's not what social media is. Instead, you see highlight reels. And if you're not careful, you start like it can make you just feel really crappy about yourself. And I think it's the same with business press in a way. You can just start feeling crappy about yourself and thinking, other companies have solved all this stuff. I haven't. Probably I should be in this spot, I guess, and it can feed into that whole imposter syndrome stuff.
I think that's where contemporaries is such great advice, Collis, because as soon as you're private,
oh yeah, then it all comes out. They're like, oh yeah,
oh yeah, then it really explodes. I've been in such forums and yeah, there's plenty.
Yeah, and even because like one of the things I used to like one source of information was always people I'd hired, and that helped a lot, or people I mentioned that before, but like that they have a stake in things, I guess. Like, when you're
Mm.
inside the company, new people will often essentially tell you about everything that's broken and say how they're going to help you fix it.
Mm.
And often will refer to experiences elsewhere that were working really well. And like that's kind of like what they're supposed to do. And like they're not, I don't mean this in any kind of Machiavellian way, just literally that's the way when you join a new
Yeah.
place, you want to
Yeah.
provide value and you want to refer to your good experiences, and you don't have like a kind of unbiased necessarily, I guess,
No.
information set. A founder from a business in a slightly different industry who has nothing to gain or lose by just chatting to you, I think can give you a bit more of an unvarnished, yeah, this is hard, or this is good, or this is the bit that I've done, without any kind of like pretense. And the same thing with people who've been there for a while, when they've they have a different set of like motives that are driving them, and your relationship as a manager is sometimes clouds things. So yeah, I just found that was something I relied on a lot, but there were some drawbacks to it. I
Yeah.
think peers would work better.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Fantastic. So just one of the other questions that comes up quite often in people's journey is, and actually not just founders, senior leaders, or anyone in a job, actually, when's the right time to go? when you've grown and grown and grown, you've got this amazing level. How do you know when you're done and you want to pass it to the next generation of leaders or whatever? How did you know? You've done that process, you've left.
Yeah.
How did you know? Like,
I think like it's very it's tricky in the sense that I've only done it one time, so I only have this like single experience.
yeah, no pattern yet.
In my experience, I think that I knew I should go for quite a lot of years in the lead up. I think my mistake was that for a long time I kept thinking, if I just fix this one more thing, if I could just like solve that problem, then it's going to be okay for me to go, or I just need to scale this bit. And there was an eventual moment where I realized this just doesn't end. There's no perfect moment to go. I think that's probably my overall lesson was there is no right moment to go. There's just the moment that is going to match up to what you need at that particular time. And finally, I think I was just overcooked. As like whatever, if when your steak has gone past well done, I don't know. It was so far past what someone should be consuming. That was where I was at. I was very burnt out, had a lot of anxiety. I'd got to the point where like I would track my anxiety each week of like, how many days did I feel anxious from work? And it had gone from like once a month to once a week to daily. And I think I was like, well, that's not good. What is the point? There's a certain point where you kind of go, oh, well, if my mental health's suffering, am I even adding the kind of value that I should be adding? And so that all kind of, I think, helped me to realize, well, there's no perfect time to go. I'm past time myself. There's no end to the number of things that I hope to do for the business. Therefore, I should just, call it a day, move on. Someone else can come in and the reality. The funny thing about like bringing in other people is, you sort of imagine, well, actually, maybe other people don't. I always have a tendency of thinking, well, no one else will be able to do it quite the way that I do it. Like it has this special, but that's rubbish. Actually, there's plenty of amazing people out there, and someone else amazing will come in and they'll bring new amazing skills to the table and do things that you couldn't do. And my own experience is that every time I exited a role, I looked back and thought, oh, that was pretty interesting. Maybe there was some stuff I was doing which was valuable, but there was some things I didn't even realize I was doing which were not valuable. And this new person's able to like make up for those shortcomings.
Yes, and the pendulum swings, it can be healthy, even different strengths.
Exactly.
At different times. Interesting.
Yeah.
And any lessons learned in that succession plan, in how you brought them in, the role you then took? Of any advice, lessons?
In my case, I think I definitely tried for a like a gentle transition is how I would describe it. And the CEO I brought in, who's been amazing, he came in with this mantra of like evolution, not revolution. He's like, I'm going to evolve the business, that's not the right phrase. Anyways, so you're going to be an evolution of where you're at. I think that was broadly good. I think if I had my time again, I would probably encourage him and encourage yesteryear me to be a bit more open to a bit more revolution, because we did eventually. Now I look back and I can see actually the changes were significant, and I think people working in the business today would see the business of whatever it is 2020 and go, oh, that's quite different. I think that maybe I erred a little to the side of like being too gentle, not wanting to hurry things along. And I think that in some ways, maybe actually you can just rip the Band-Aid. I think I was a little bit like, let's just take the Band-Aid off very slowly. Yeah. And it's like, there is some merit to that. But at the end of the day, I just think sometimes that leaves people in this kind of like a longer term feeling of change rather than just going, whoa, okay, that was a lot, but all right, now we got it. This is how things are going to work.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's change management generally in a way, isn't it? It's like,
Yes. Yeah.
People fear change, so you go softly, but actually,
Yes.
is that better?
Yeah.
Really
One thing I did, which I think helped, was I definitely telegraphed for quite some time that I would be leaving. So like my philosophy on communication is always to be fairly clear, but also not have too many surprises. And so I did tell people literally 3 years in advance that I was going to change. It was like, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but this is my plan. And it's like, you'll probably have enough time to go do a university degree and come back and still see me on my exit back. But just so you know, so it's not like a big shock to the system. And I think that helped. Like it just became a fact. Like everyone knew that at some point my plan was to exit. It wasn't like a big shock or anything like that. I think that helped, especially in a business where I'd been a single CEO founder for so many years. There was I think it was a big like change. And so being open and transparent, and also maybe taking a bit of the emotion out of it, being like, it's like, that's just going to happen. And look, there's all these amazing managers. It's not going to be a radical shift. That helps. Though, as I say, like maybe I went too slow, too soft. The Band-Aid ripped for 3 years.
It was just falling off. It's okay. Okay. Awesome. The role you took, you went onto the board, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Do that again? Do you enjoy that? Is that weird changing role?
Yeah, and no, I think it was good. Like, and I think that I would definitely take, because I think it's helpful to have some kind of continuity. And so taking a board seat, or rather, I'd been on the board, but like just exclusively a board seat, I think was helpful. I think it was also good in the sense that Hisham, the incoming CEO, and I had a relationship where we, even to this day, still speak maybe every couple of weeks or every week during particularly intense times. And there are still things around product space which I think I still hold in my head. Like at the end of the day, I think you need to understand, well, over time, I came to realize I needed to understand the things that I actually were doing that were value, that was harder to replace, and the stuff that I was doing, which was actually more, not generic, that's not the right word, but there's plenty of people with those skills. And I think some of the leadership that I was doing, not that hard to replace. You could find a CEO who understood how to lead a company much better than me at much bigger scale. And so those things, like stepping back from, was fine. I think the place where I had, and even to this day have some value still to add into the business, is the industry space. Like, when you've lived in an industry for 20 years, there's some things you just understand that are hard to pick up quickly. And especially, I mean, it's almost trite to say, like, it's fast moving industry. Like every industry at this point with technology and AI and what have you is fast moving. So I think just ensuring you keep some continuity and that kind of voice, I think, has been helpful. And so even to this day, I still work with some of the product people, especially in the more innovation end of things, less in the kind of like the bread and butter products where I think they outdo me. Like the product experience of people whose field this product is like far outstrips me. But when it comes to things like innovation in our particular industry, then I think it's harder to find someone who's got that same wealth of experience. And maybe as you get older, I think you get a bit more comfortable about what you know, what you don't know, and what you're actually able to be, where you can be useful. And I think over time I could see, that is actually a place where I'm useful beyond just the board. That I actually, I think I'm useful. You should really interview my CEO. Maybe he'll be like, he is useful.
That's the next series. Yeah, of course. But that's really interesting. And did you have to sort of work out where the lines were there? Like,
Oh
do you
yes,
have
totally.
an innovation team you're allowed to play with, or
Yeah. And it was like, so over time with Hisham, he and I talked about essentially which roles were helpful to have input from me. And for a long time, I would just go through him, and it was him who went, why don't you just talk to them yourself? It's okay. Like, it's, like, don't go and rearrange the company priorities for me. But if you're just talking about innovation with innovation people, then that's fine. And so I think that's been helpful. Obviously, I think it's very important to not undermine your CEO. And so I would never dream of doing that. But at the same time, occasionally I was maybe guilty of being so cautious that I wasn't actually adding value. Like, oh, I don't want to overstep, so I'll just watch them do that thing wrong and hope they notice, hope they realize. And so I think having that conversation with my CEO was very helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's not an uncommon role for the founder to continue in, is it? It makes sense. You've innovated all those years,
Yeah. And like, I think, now with the benefit of hindsight, I often think to myself that I probably could have exited the CEO role a good, I don't know, maybe 10 years earlier, like just a lot earlier, and just focused a bit more on the innovation space. I don't know. It's so hard to know. Like,
yeah, you can't.
Could have. Who knows?
Yeah. There's no control on these things.
No.
All right. Well, just to end, your most important advice to a scale-up CEO who's running a company every day that's bigger than the...
Yeah. I think I would say that it is to trust yourself a bit more than, well, this is advice to myself, so I don't know, maybe other people are super confident, but I think for a person who is like me, I probably could have stood to hear someone say, I think you should trust your own instincts a bit more. Occasionally I was this is flying in the face of some of the things I've said before. There were some things that I didn't trust myself on in the commercial sense. I think in the management organization design, probably trust yourself less, Collis. Just accept budgets and organization structures. But I think on the bread and butter of being an entrepreneur, where it is about that particular industry, that particular set of market dynamics, I think it's important just to know that people coming in from outside the business will often not have the kind of instincts that you have as a scale-up founder. I think as a kind of seasoned executive, that coming in, there's a lot of other stuff they'll bring to the table, but it was rare over time for me to find someone who came in and actually understood this particular industry. And I made a few mistakes where I thought they did, like that. I'd think, oh, okay, well, here's the professional. The professionals have arrived. I should just defer. And I think that where I was often making mistakes was there were certain types of things I should have deferred more, and there was like some of that core entrepreneurship I think I should have held on to more tightly. And so I think that'd probably be my advice to another founder in the same sort of spot, is just to guard a little bit of that sort of commercial entrepreneurship a little more tightly.
Yeah, and by that you mean growth, kind of innovation.
Yeah, innovation on products, like the things that are the core skill sets you have to have when you first start. And so for me, I think I maybe didn't value some of those as much as I should have. Kind of thought, oh, well, like, especially in our case, it wasn't that I'd tried 10 businesses and then finally one took. It was like we started something and then it worked. And so maybe I didn't value, wait, there is actually, over time, I've come to believe a particular skill set in understanding market dynamics of what's going to actually like take, where there's value, and how to like make something out of nothing. That is a skill set that is independent of product design or marketing strategy, or like, and it's a specific skill set that you do kind of continue to need. And so where I look at technology companies that have done really well and scaled up, you often see the founder continuing to hold some of that vision, while they might bring in, really like far superior executives who can run an organization, but maybe don't have quite the same gut instincts on, wait, where's the market going to go next? And in an industry like ours, probably like all industries, there's a constant horizon coming. And if you're not paying attention to like, where's this moving, I just think you maybe will end up left on the sidelines. And so I think as a scale-up founder, I think it's just important to distinguish between the skill sets that are about scaling up, which I think are things that, at least in my instance, I should have been faster to bring in, faster to listen to others, less trusting of my own instincts. And then there are skill sets which are the reason why the business had taken in the first place. And I was too quick to assume, well, if someone knows how to scale a business, they must know how to do this bit too, because surely like this bit is like not that hard. And over time I came to realize, no, that's not true. They are just different skill sets. You might have someone who has both, but that was not mostly my experience. And so I think I should have maybe spent more effort protecting that.
Yeah, fantastic. That's an amazing insight, and really resonates with other businesses too. Awesome. Sounds like you've found a very good balance in your territory, and
I don't know, maybe, I hope. I'm much happier. That's always a good signal though.
I'm really pleased. Thank you so much, Collis.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you for having me on.